It's time for the Bible Geek. We don't really know for sure what is and what is not. Holy Ghost, God, baby, God blasted on the spot. Ghost, yes, friends, it's time for the Bible Geek. Jesus, our planet, Matthew, Mark, John.
Well, it's time for a special Yuletide edition of the Bible Geek. And not only is there a Santa Claus, but here I am to prove it. Well, let's see, I'm doing this in response to geekish demand, and I'm always happy to acquiesce to such. I thought I'd open this up with something probably inappropriate. Some of you have seen this on Facebook, but let me introduce things with some holiday cheer. An Intertextual Visit from St. Nick by Clement C. Moore and Edgar Allan Poe. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, the children were nestled all snug in their beds. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping. Out on the lawn there arose such a clatter. I sprang from my desk to see what was the matter. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping on my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at the window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Away to the window I flew like a flash. Open here I flung the shutter and threw up the sash. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dreamt before. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than ravens his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now nevermore, nevermore, never at all. The skies they were ashen and sober, the leaves they were crisped and sere, and as dry leaves before the hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetops the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before, and then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed as from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh, quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, as I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and it looked like a peddler just opening his pack, and the lamplight o'er him streaming cast his shadow on the floor. His eyes, how they had the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath, like the lavas that restlessly roll their sulphurous currents down Yaanek in the ultimate climbs of the pole, that groan as they roll down Mount Yaanek in the realm of the boreal pole. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. "Sir," said I, "truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." And laying a finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. By that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore." But I heard him exclaim, as he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas, nevermore." Okay, I hope that gives you a warm holiday feeling. I tried to get Bing Crosby to do that, but he was dead. Of course, on this show, that wouldn't necessarily have stopped him anyhow. Let's take a look at the nativity stories. Some of this stuff we've gone over before, of course, but let's repackage it like a good Christmas gift and make various random observations as we go through these nativity stories. By the way, there is a super great book on this. It's been out for a long, long time. Raymond E. Brown's book, The Birth of the Messiah. That is just really terrific. Let's see. Okay, let's start with the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Then he goes into a long list of begats, right, as Clarence Darrow once said. Why does he make a big deal of him being the son of David? Well, of course, there's the idea of Jesus being the Messiah, and he's trying to show Jesus as the credentials for that. He's descended from King David. But why the son of Abraham? What is the point of that? Does that have anything to do with messiahship? Well, no, this is a different agenda item. This is, I think, a counter-polemic to Jewish rumors that Jesus was the son of Mary and Pandera, a Roman soldier. You can see this portrayed in the life of Brian, right? But it's a very, very old notion that Pandera, the Panther, a common Roman soldier nickname, that he was really that either raped Mary or she was a prostitute and he was one of her customers and so forth. The Toledoth Yeshu has this. Toledoth Yeshu, actually a set of Jewish counter-gospels from the Middle Ages, but based on patristic references, we seem to have the same polemical traditions centuries before, and I think already at this time, whenever Matthew was written sometime in the mid-2nd century. And so the point is to rebut that. Apparently, though there is a fascinating theory that this isn't exactly a rebuttal, but at least that issue is there. Oh yeah, tracing it back to Abraham. Let's see. There are 4 women mentioned in this. Right, we've got in Matthew 1. 5, and Salmon, or Salmon, maybe that's where they get ichthys, I don't know, the father of Boaz by Rahab. Okay, there's this, there is Rahab the harlot, hint, hint, from the book of Joshua, and Boaz, this is counting, okay, let's just stick with these and not go through the whole genealogy. Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth. Aha, there's another one. What do we know about Ruth? Well, she was a Moabite convert to Judaism because of her Jewish husband, but stuck with it after he died. And we've already seen Rahab as a prostitute and also probably a priestess of Leviathan, also known as Nehushtan and Rahab. But prostitute, right? A cult prostitute in that case. Now, Ruth, she was associated with some risque behavior in the Targums and Jewish legend at the time of the New Testament. And what did she do wrong? Well, the thing about her attending that harvest festival, they tended to be orgies, it says that Boaz, her kinsman, was passed out drunk, and she got under the cover and lay by his feet. Well, that is often, or sometimes in Hebrew, a euphemism for penis, as we say member, or they used to anyhow. Okay, so, and remember what we're following here, the genealogy of David and then the Messiah. These dubious women are involved. In verse 6, Jesse, the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. Remember the adulteress Bathsheba, whom David shacked up with. Okay, then Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, and so on and so on. And let's see, who am I missing here? We've got Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and oh boy, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. You'll have to excuse my senility. And we eventually get to Mary. Oh, Tamar's in there. Right. She's the one that played the harlot in order to get her levirate marriage rights from Judah, her father-in-law, who wouldn't give them to her, etc., etc. But Jane Shaberg, in a book called The Illegitimacy of Jesus a number of years ago, she got great scholarly recognition for that book once the fundamentalist Hicks that got wind of the book took a shotgun to her car. Luckily, she wasn't into it at the time, but a bit controversial, you can see. Shaberg proposed that you got to have some explanation for why only these 4 women are in there, and beyond that, why they're all kind of dubious sexually. And she says, well, Matthew is artfully trying to say, yeah, there is something to that Pandera business. Presumably that Mary was raped, couldn't help that. Not that she was cheating on Joseph. And in fact, the Toledoth Yeshu, which is really much more positive than you would expect if it is merely an anti-gospel or a gospel satire. Hugh Schoenfield pointed out long ago in a book called According to the Hebrews that this is much more likely to have been a Jewish redaction of a Jewish Christian gospel. I think he's right about that. At any rate, it exonerates her. She was tricked into having sex with Pandera and so forth. But however it happened, Jesus was half Jewish, and he was the son of a Roman soldier. It may be that Matthew knows this is true and is admitting it, but saying, look, these other women of dubious sexual redolents were used by God to bring about the Messiah? How about the mother of the Messiah himself? Then shortly thereafter, it says that Mary was found to be pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Well, that certainly implies a miraculous conception, doesn't it? No, it does not. Not necessarily, Shaberg says, because in the Targums, in the stories of Judah and Tamar, we got about 4 of them, and in all of them, just as they're about to stone Tamar to death, in the Bible, in Genesis, it is Judah that says, oh, wait a minute, I see what's happened here. I'm the one at fault, not her. And they say, okay. And in the Targums, though, it takes a divine visitation, a voice from heaven saying, this thing is from me. She is righteous, and so on. Well, Shaberg says the way the Holy Spirit is sort of a catch-all euphemism for the activity of God, that could be what's going on here, that it's saying that this is the will of God, don't worry. So a scandal, well, yes, but the cross is a scandal too. Interesting possibility, and if that is the case, as Shaberg argues, then Matthew isn't talking about a miraculous conception at all, only a providential one. Now that would help get us out of another problem with the Matthean nativity. If there is intended a miraculous conception, meaning that Joseph isn't the father of Jesus and no man is, then what the heck is this genealogy doing in here at all? Well, if Shaberg is wrong, and it is up in the air, who knows, and Matthew does mean to say that Jesus was the product of a divine conception, then you really have to excise the genealogy or the statement of a miraculous conception, if that's what it means. You have to excise one or the other, because it would be utterly ridiculous to argue that here's the goods, here's the credentials of Jesus being descended from David and from Abraham, but by the way, he was only the adopted son of the guy who was descended from these worthies. That's just ridiculous. Brown says, well, it would work. I mean, he'd legally be Joseph's son. No, I suggest to you no one would have dared propose such a thing. I mean, it fails right at the crucial point. The father that passes on these messianic genes, what? Isn't actually the father? Come on now. Now, so my guess is that the opening of Matthew originally had the genealogy and not the miraculous conception, but you don't really know, and it wouldn't have taken much to interpolate the references to the Spirit, as brief as they are in verses 18 and 20. Now, let's get to another odd little item. In 1:23, we're told that the naming of Jesus, as well as his conception and birth, are fulfillments of what Isaiah says in Isaiah 7:14 and Matthew 1:22 and following. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had borne a son, and he called his name Emmanuel? No, Jesus. Huh? That strikes me as very odd. There is a congruity in one way and incongruity in another. Here's what I mean. This whole thing is a fulfillment of a prediction that a Savior child will be named. His name shall be called Emmanuel, and then it goes right on to say, yep, in fulfillment of that, they named him Jesus. Oh boy. Well, it's been pointed out that this does kind of fit in that it forms a chiasmus, this literary structure thing where you have this mirroring of something at the beginning by something in the end, and then so on and so on the further you go in the gospel. Well, this would match the Great Commission at the end of this gospel. Behold, I'm with you always, even to the consummation of the age. There is the risen Jesus promising to be with the disciples. And here, God is with us. That's pretty convincing. I think that's probably right. But it's still a little hard to figure. How would he say this is a fulfillment of the kid being born and being named Emmanuel, when it goes right on to say they named him Jesus? All I can guess is there is some sort of interpolation somewhere along the line that I'm not prepared to say where, but it just seems to me such a screaming inconsistency that someone has added half of the Isaiah 7:14 quote in order to create the chiasm. I don't know, though. Very strange. What about the virgin thing, right? Usually critics say that the notion of a virgin has been imported from the Septuagint Greek translation of Isaiah 7:14, which was a mistranslation because the word in Hebrew, alma, translated Parthenos, didn't necessarily mean an intact virgin, a woman who had not yet had sex, right? I forget the Hebrew word. Jeez, I'm blanking on it, that would specifically have to mean a technical virgin. Alma could mean that, but it's more ambiguous. It just means maiden or young woman. So it's supposed to be a mistranslation, but Shaberg said, hold on a minute. The Septuagint translators weren't stupid. The fact that they thought Parthenos was, they must have known what that meant in Hebrew, and the fact that they thought Parthenos was an apt translation, doesn't that kind of mean that even the Greek word had come to reflect the same ambiguity? And in that case, is this use of the word virgin supposed to necessarily mean that Mary had not had sex? Maybe not. Oh, boy, I tell you, there's just all kinds of fascinating things in this. Okay, let's go on in. Oh yeah, here's something that comes up in Catholic Protestant debates. It's worth mentioning. Just read this part, but let me call attention to it. He did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, or took her as his wife, married her, right? But knew her not until she had borne a son. And he called his name Jesus. Now, Protestants have always said, well, there you go, papists. This perpetual virginity of Mary nonsense. Where the heck did you get that? Granted, Joseph didn't have sex with her before the birth of Jesus. But it says, that was for a limited period of time until the birth of Jesus, and then, then it was on. Well, Catholics have replied, come on, this isn't trying to tell you what may or may not have happened between Mary and Joseph after the birth of Jesus. Of what interest would that be to the writer? The point is what didn't happen before the birth of Jesus, right? He's just trying to guarantee that Jesus, again, depending on how you take virgin, right, but the traditional way. The point is to say Jesus couldn't have been Joseph's son. It isn't trying to say, oh, but afterward. No, I think the Catholics are certainly right on that one. That is Protestant text twisting. Now, it may turn out, of course, like in the Nazareth pericope about the, don't we know this guy? Isn't he the son of the carpenter? Aren't his brothers, Tom, Dick, and Harry, still here? And his sister Gertrude, and so forth. Well, yeah, that indeed would cast a different light on the matter. But the point is, this verse doesn't say what Protestants say it does. In fact, it seems to me that is a perverse interpretation of it. All right, now about the wise guys. 2:1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, or in Anatole in Greek, in the east, or when it rose, because Anatole, from which we get the name Anatolia, means it's in the east, the land of the sunrise, just like Japan, the land of the rising sun. It's the same idea. So we don't know whether they're trying to say we came from Anatolia or we came when we saw the star rise. It's really impossible to tell. Now, who were these guys? They're not given names here, right? Forget about the Christmas cards. Melchior, Balthazar, and Casper, the friendly wise man. That doesn't say that, right? Where do we get the idea that there were three of them? Because it doesn't say. Well, naturally, that's an inference, and not a bad one, from the fact that there are these three gifts presented to the baby Jesus. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? And so it's natural to picture each one handing off a gift, like in the life of Brian and so forth. And that's not a perverse interpretation, right? But it is just an inference. It doesn't say, and it was never obvious to everybody in the early church, because there were interpreters long ago that thought there must have been 12 wise men, and it certainly doesn't say they're kings. What are they? Well, they're certainly supposed to be astrologers, the ancient caste of astrologers from Persia, the great rivals of the prophet Zoroaster. They were called the Magi, and that name stuck. And did the star lead them along like Tinkerbell? No, it doesn't say that, and in fact it pretty much says the opposite. The astrological significance they had assigned to the constellation Pisces, they had one for each country they knew of, and for a star to appear or whatever they're talking about in Pisces meant, big event among the Jewish people, must be a new king. It was kind of a common legendary thing, right? A comet heralded the birth of Julius Caesar, and so they said, okay, they must have a new king. Let's go pay our respects. Well, where would he be? Well, of course, in the palace of the current reigning king in Jerusalem. They must think it's Herod the Great's son. Of course, he gets there. Turns out it's not new king. Well, what are you talking about? And the star, etc. And he's not here. Well, where should we go then? And he calls in his scripture advisors. What are they talking about? What king? Do you have any clues where they ought to go? And he says, well, yeah, it must be the thing in the prophets that Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though little to be among the clans of Judah, from you will come forth for me the one from of old, and to shepherd my people Israel, and so on. And Bethlehem, okay, city of David, that's where they'd go, and Herod, being paranoid, figures, something's up here. I bet this is a case of some rebels using a newborn child as a kind of a battle standard, saying we've had enough of this phony Jewish king. Herod was an Edomite, half Edomite, half Arab. We've had enough of him. Let's rally everybody to the messianic king who has been born, and in his name we will fight against Herod and secure the throne for when he's old enough to sit upon it. Not unreasonable. Such things had happened before. And so Herod says to himself, I got to put a stop to this. And he says to the wise men, well, gee, I would love to join you when you find him. Would you come back and tell me exactly where he is so I can come and reverence him too? Oh, sure. Well, they head toward Bethlehem. on the king's directions, but then we're told that they see the star again as if it had winked out in the meantime, and the star, not their directions, led them to the very hovel in Bethlehem where Mary and Joseph lived. They don't go to Bethlehem because of a census. That's in Luke, and it doesn't fit this story. Why is Tinkerbell brought back in? Why does it say the star visibly moved across the night sky, leading them where they knew to go anyhow? And how could it indicate which particular home the baby had been born into, by the way, but about 2 years before? All right, when did you see this star? As a result, you know what he does. He has his massacre happen to all Bethlehem baby boys who are 2 years old and younger. So this isn't really, the night of Jesus' birth anyhow. Why does the star lead him there? You got me, but that certainly means this story is composite. Somebody didn't understand the original significance of the star not moving, but signaling the birth of a new heir to the Jewish throne. And Herod the Great was a puppet king, but on paper he was independent. So yeah, he would, if he had a son, it would be a prince. In fact, he did have several. You read about 2 or 3 or 4 of them elsewhere in the Gospels later. So they go there, they see him. Now, how did it? Did the star shine a little stage spotlight on the house? That's the writer apparently just didn't think about that. There's no way you could narrow it down if you're really talking about a star, unless of course you are talking about Tinkerbell, and that's an angel hovering right above. Because stars sometimes were symbols for angels in the Bible. That's very clear. So that's a possible way of getting out of this particular problem. An angel led them, but then you still have to wonder why he was necessary. Anyhow, once the wise men do their thing, they get a revelation from an angel in a dream that says, look, don't go back to Herod. He's planning some mischief. Okay. And they go back to the east by another route than the one they came. And time goes by. Herod says, where the heck are these guys? How long could it be taken? And somehow he surmises that they've tricked him. And he says, okay, I'm sending my goon squad to stamp out all of them. Now, this is something Herod the Great could be imagined doing because of his great reputation as a paranoid murderer, even of his own kids. Now, this is why his patron, the Emperor Augustus, once said, give it the choice, I'd rather be Herod's pig, little pun there, his huigos, his pig, than his son, huios, without the gamma, because his pigs would be safe from abuse, since he at least pretends to be a Jew and is not going to go around having pork. Right? But his sons, well, he kills them off left and right if he suspects they're trying to plot against him, and that was the case. Now, that gives the story verisimilitude. It's kind of what the reader expects of Herod, but does that mean this happened? Well, no, you see, this cuts both ways. There's no historical record of this, and Josephus tells us about many other Herodian atrocities, not this one. And he kills all the babies in a well-known town in Judah, the city of David. I'd think that would make the news, right? But it doesn't. But it sure does sound like the story of the nativity of Moses, especially as it was being read in that time, which we know because of Josephus's retelling of the story, where Pharaoh is alerted by a star, which his wise men explain, his sorcerer priests, the guys with the staffs and all that later on. And he says, they tell him that a deliverer of the Jews is coming. And he says, okay, we got to put a stop to that. And that is why, as in Exodus, the Pharaoh tries to have all the boy babies killed. Right? And It's not that specific in Exodus, and not after one kid. But they are in Josephus, and Matthew looks an awful lot like that. And I think it's more likely he's just rewritten Josephus's nativity story about Moses. What about the wise men, though? There were magi, right? I just explained that. There is viable historical background there. But that looks kind of similar to a story told by several ancient sources, and Dio Cassius and I think Pliny the Elder and others, who tell us how Tiridates, one of the lesser kings under the Parthian emperor, came to the inauguration, the coronation of the Emperor Nero, and presented gifts to him and publicly bowed before him and said, "I worship you as I do my god Mithras." And then after the big celebration, actually, in this case, there were three kings, Tiridates and a couple of other ones, and they went back home to Parthia, same place, by a different route than the one they arrived by. Well, Raymond Brown suggests it's the same sort of thing, and I think it's euphemistically saying this is the origin of that feature of the story. And, I mean, they were even from the same place. Come on. So, again, fiction and not history. Oh, let's see. What else do I want to... the angel tells Joseph that the kid's in trouble. Herod's after him. They better get out of town fast. Why don't you go as far as Egypt? They'll never find you there. And so they do. Of course, he could have told angels to go to appear to the dads of all the kids that are about to get skewered by Herod the Great's goons, but we don't hear anything about that. So they do split. They go to Egypt, and the other kids get butchered. Well, after an undetermined time in Egypt, an angel tells Joseph again, the coast is clear. It's safe to go back home now because those who sought the child are dead. And Joseph said, it's about time. And here I was almost done learning hieroglyphics, but they do go back. But before they get home, the angel says, oops, breaking news. Herod the Great's been replaced by his no-good son, Archelaus, who's just as bad. Maybe you better go somewhere else. Don't go back to Bethlehem. Go up country to Nazareth. Yeah, they'll never spot you there. Okay. And so he does. And this is all an attempt to explain how Jesus could have been born in Bethlehem, which they figured the Messiah had to be. And yet be known as Jesus from Nazareth. Well, okay, he was born in one, but hailed from the other. Luke is going to try to deal with that too, though he does so in an opposite way. It's kind of funny the angel didn't have his facts straight to begin with, but have you ever wondered why they had to go to Egypt? I mean, wouldn't you assume Herod the Great thought his little maneuver had worked? Would he have had any reason to think that the real kid he was after, the supposed heir to the throne, had hightailed it out of there in the wee hours? Presumably, he thought it worked. And if he did, it's impossible to imagine his son Archelaus then figuring, I got to finish up my dad's work and find that little brat and kill him. What? He would have thought that was long taken care of, so it doesn't really work. The fiction is not completely well thought out, I fear. Now, why did Matthew... let me just answer my own question. Why did Matthew think that Jesus and his family had to go to Egypt? Well, because they were scanning the Old Testament for hidden information, kind of like Kabbalistic interpretation, hidden information about Jesus. Certain words would pop up, and then, this must have something about Jesus. And they saw Hosea 11:1. Out of Egypt I have called my son. Well, Matthew was a scholar of Scripture. He uses 3 different versions of it in his quotes. He knew what that meant. It's obvious that it refers to the Exodus from Egypt, right? The son there is the people of Israel, right? But he figures, son, God's son. This must have to do with Jesus. And this means he must have gone to Egypt at some point and come back. Yeah, so let's have him do it. I mean, it's superfluous in terms of the logic of the narrative, but not according to the logic of their esoteric interpretation of Scripture. So there's some highlights of Matthew's enchanting nativity story. It's pretty neat if you ignore the massacre. Now, why do people just... I mean, they don't even really try to explain it, right? They're just, oh boy, Jesus escaped. Well, yeah, it's like a fairy tale. The historical background does not offer events. I mean, there's no reason to think this happened, right? And the one who wrote it knew that, and this is all just window dressing to get the story ahead. It doesn't bother the evangelist Matthew. Oh, how would God have allowed this? Because he knew he hadn't. Nothing had happened there. It's just a fairy tale, and he's not really... There's no real deaths to hold God responsible for, right? So another sign that it's fiction. Now, let's take a look at the Gospel of Luke. Well, I'm going to skip most of the business about John the Baptist's nativity. There are interesting things to say about that, like its probable origin as part of the scriptures of the John the Baptist sect competing with Christianity, but here's something worth... Okay, let's just start with 126. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin. Again, there's that Parthenos. What did it really mean by then? Betrothed, but let's just say it means strictly virgin at this point. To a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her and said, "Hail, O favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at the saying, and considered in her mind, that is, not out loud, what sort of greeting this might be. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God, and behold, you will conceive in your womb," where else, "and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus." Now, this is an Old Testament formula for angelic annunciations of various other ancient heroes. "He will be great," and the rest of this is in verse. "He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." Let's skip verse 34 for the moment. "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God." Well, this whole thing appears to be based on actually a quote from the book of Daniel, but you're not going to find it looking it up, because this is part of another version of Daniel, an Aramaic one, which is preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it's got the same terms in it, and a couple of the same lines, I think, word for word, and so this is based on Aramaic Daniel. I read it skipping verse 34, because I think that is pretty obviously an interpolation. There are several more of these so-called canticles in the nativity stories of John and Jesus in the beginning of Luke, and they're never interrupted. The other recipients of them from God, or those who give them as songs, they don't interrupt them with prose. But here in verse 34, right before the last part of it. And Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, since I know not a man?" RSV, as I have no husband. But the angel said to her, etc. Wait a minute, aren't you engaged? Right? Didn't we just hear that? Don't you plan to have kids? What do you mean? How is this possible? It seems clear that someone has interpolated this in order to pave the way for a virginal miraculous conception. Formally it doesn't fit because the other ones don't have interruptions. Logically it doesn't fit because it's completely stupid. And there are a couple of manuscripts that don't have the interruption. So I think case closed. This is not originally part of the text, and the person that interpolated it was right. It is not at all clear that Mary is supposed to have had a divine miraculous conception. Oh, let's see. She gets up after the vision. In those days, Mary arose and went with haste into the hill country, to a city of Judah, and entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth and so on. She got up. Well, I always took that to mean that she got ready to go. But you could translate it, she woke up, implying that the angel had visited her in a dream, as Matthew had the angel appearing to Joseph in a dream, right? And with pretty much the same message. It's interesting that Matthew has the angel appear only to Joseph. Luke has him appear only to Mary. And they don't agree on much, except, again, a Bethlehem Nazareth connection, but they explain that in completely diametrical ways. Again, don't want to get into the whole thing with John the Baptist, but you have the Magnificat coming up. Mary and Elizabeth exchange news about pregnancies, and then verse 46 it says, "And Mary said, My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has regarded the low estate of his handmaiden. For behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed." That is, as opposed to what they've called me up to now, right? Low estate, etc. "For he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name," and so on. It's interesting to note that some manuscripts don't attribute this to Mary. Some say, "and Elizabeth said," or just, "and she said," and Elizabeth would be the only antecedent to that. Now this implies, and that makes sense because Elizabeth was an old woman who was barren and had no kids, and so people figured, well, she must be a sinner, or God would reward her with kids. It's all based on Hannah, the mother of Samuel, back in 1 Samuel. And so God has taken away this woman's reproach. Mary had no reason to say this. She bore no reproach. She was a young woman, not even married yet. It has to originally have been Elizabeth's Magnificat, so that's worth knowing, I suppose. Then we get to the birth of John the Baptist and so on. In chapter 2, we have the famous problem of the census, 2:1. "In those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was the governor of Syria." That's the province. We'll see the problems here in a minute. "And all went to be enrolled, each to his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth." You get that? They live in Nazareth. Okay, he went up from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to be delivered. Wait a minute. He's going to take his extremely pregnant wife on this trip. Why? She's not descended from David. Wouldn't it be enough if he did? And wait a second. Has anybody ever conducted a census that required you to sign up where, not where you live, but where your ancestor lived a full millennium before? Taxation censuses don't work that way, right? They want to know where they can come to collect the money, not where your remote ancestors once lived. So forget it. There's a big problem, but you'll see, you know why Luke does this. Let's see. So she gives birth. Verse 7, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in the manger, though you could also translate that, laid him on the open ground, because there was no place for them in the inn. Firstborn son? Protestants say, hey, papists, don't you get it? She must have had other children, right? So where do you get this perpetual virginity thing? Nope, I'm sorry, Protestants. The Catholics are, I'm afraid, right again. The point is that she hadn't had any previous children, right? That's the point. Not however many she had, like the Duggars on the TV show afterward. Like, she could have been old Mother Hubbard afterward, but we don't know. It's not suggesting that. Right, the point is there weren't any before then. Is that twisting the text? No, that was perfectly good usage, because, like, we have a tombstone from that period which says so-and-so, Livia or whatever, she died giving birth to her, you guessed it, firstborn. Well, you can pretty well be sure she didn't have any more kids afterward, because she was dead. So I'm afraid the Protestants are just twisting that text. Hallelujah. So they happened to be in the providence of God in Bethlehem in order to fulfill the prophecy, and then they went back home to Nazareth. So let's get this straight. According to Matthew, they lived in Bethlehem and took it on the lam to Egypt and then to Nazareth. But here, his parents live in Nazareth, go to Bethlehem just in time for him to be born there, according to a circumstance that couldn't have existed, and then they go back home to Nazareth. No flight to Egypt, no Herod the Great persecuting them. In fact, they go right to Jerusalem, where Herod the Great would be in state and have the circumcision and so on. Oh, let's see, we didn't mention the shepherds, but who cares? It's pretty straightforward. Strauss went into all kinds of details about the impossibility of the census affecting them. When Quirinius was the governor of Syria, he did indeed preside over a census, which occurred in 6 A.D. or C.E. But Herod the Great died between 4 and 6 B.C.E. So, according to Matthew, Jesus was born before the death of Herod the Great, right? Because Herod was trying to kill him. So, what about the 10-year gap? What do you do with that? William Ramsay, the archaeologist and shameless apologist, said, oh, well, wait a minute, here's a fragmentary reference on a monument to Quirinius receiving some honor from the Roman government because of a military victory. Hey, conceivably that could be in an earlier time, one when Herod was still alive. Maybe that meant he had been given the governorship of that Roman province earlier and later returned to office, had another tenure as governor. There is no hint of any such thing. Besides, Tertullian happens to tell us who were the governors of the province of Syria in the time of Herod the Great. It was two different guys, Quintilius Varus and what is it? Sentius Saturninus. There's no room for this. And plus, they wouldn't have been collecting taxes in the time of Herod the Great anyway, because Judea, which he ruled, was not part of the Roman Empire. It was a kind of a puppet state under Roman protection, but they didn't tax those people. In fact, later on in the book of Acts, we read about Judas of Galilee, who led a revolt against Rome. Why? Because of the taxes in 6 AD, because they had never been taxed by Rome before, because only now have they become part of the empire, and he wouldn't stand for it. So this just doesn't work. It's just a mess. And again, this is somewhat less serious than if this were presented as some sort of official history. He's just putting pieces and patches together to tell the story of the nativity. There is also a genealogy, but it's not where you'd expect. It's in 323 after the baptism of Jesus by John. Now this one, as I know you know, is irreconcilable with the Matthean genealogy. It just does not work. There are few names in common. It can't be a genuine genealogy of Joseph's ancestors, as it purports to be, because the whole thing with Joseph is that he's supposed to be Davidic, that is from the tribe of Judah. But this thing is stuffed, packed with priestly names. Mathat, Heli, Levi, Mattathias, another Mattathias. There's Mathat, the son of Levi, and Menna, the son of Mattatha, and and then finally we get down to Noah and so forth. What's going on here? How can both genealogies be those of Jesus? Well, of course they can't be. And out of desperation, a lot of people have decided to champion a desperate theory by a couple of 19th century German Roman Catholic apologists who said, hey, maybe the Lucan genealogy is actually that of Mary. Yeah, not of Joseph. Sorry, it says Joseph, right? Now, again, there's a little funny business in both of the genealogies, because it kind of has a jog at the very point where it connects Jesus with Joseph. Since we're on Luke at the moment, let's stick with that. 323, Jesus, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years of age, being the son, as was supposed, the son of Joseph. Wait a second. When did that... I mean, if it was only supposed, why are we getting the rest of the genealogy? What's the point? Right, and then in going back to Matthew, where the genealogy is given going forward, not backward, as in Luke, it says in 1:16, Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. That's a little odd. Why add the husband of Mary? Well, in fact, there's an old Sinaitic Syriac manuscript that just says, Joseph, the father of Jesus, or literally Joseph begat Jesus. You got to wonder if that's a weird scribal glitch, or if that is a sole surviving copy of the way it originally read, in which case there wouldn't be any conflict with the genealogy and the rest of the story. Well, what the heck, beat that to death. I mean, that would make the genealogy legitimate and purposeful, whereas if there's a miraculous birth, what the heck is the point, right? I once asked the authority on ancient Judaism, is it possible that they would give the mother's genealogy under the father's name? Because some people have whipped this up into making it into a common custom. Oh, well, women got the short end of the deal back then, and they would preserve the information, but credit it to the husband. Of course, that's the stupidest idea anybody ever had, right? Why keep the records if you're not going to keep straight who you're talking about, right? And Neusner said no, he'd never heard of anything. Somebody's just winging it here, and it's obvious why. I'll finish with just the weirdest, wackiest harmonization of the Bible that anybody has ever proposed, and that is that of Rudolf Steiner, who created the Anthroposophical Society, and he claimed to have sort of clairvoyant visions of the past, and he could tell you what happened on Atlantis and stuff. Well, he had a bunch of Jesus visions, kind of like Edgar Cayce, and he said that, you see, there are these problems with the different nativities and genealogies, but that's okay. They're not talking about the same Jesus. There were two Jesus children, as he calls them. One was a reincarnation of Solomon, and the other of Zoroaster. And at one point, somewhere along the line, one of the two died, and the spirit incarnated in him passed over into the surviving Jesus, so that Jesus in the Gospels is the bearer of the souls of both Solomon and Zoroaster. Well, congratulations. That is the king of harmonizations, and I don't know why evangelical apologists don't go for that. That would be, that would get them out of a tight spot. Okay, well, I guess that's it for my Christmas Eve almost chat. I don't know if this is going to go up before or after Christmas. I guess we have to rely upon the divine will of John Felix and Sir Jan, and because it's not that they would be Grinches and hold out on you, but I've put them in the position waiting so long to do this. But at least I did it finally. So there is a Christmas edition of the Bible Geek. I'll see you soon, probably before the new year, I should think. But in any event, I hope everybody has a merry Christmas, solstice, human light, or whatever other kind of fake Christmas you want to have, pretending you're not celebrating it. So, see you soon. Ho, ho, ho. Well, it's time for a special Yuletide edition of the
The Bible Geek was recorded by Robert M. Price and produced by John Felix and Sergeant Jovanovich. Theme song by John Morris. Visit us at robertmprice.mindvendor.com for more info on Robert's projects, purchase Bible Geek merchandise, and click the ever-important Donate button. Send your questions to criticus@aol.com, and be sure to rate and review The Bible Geek on iTunes. Thanks for listening to The Bible Geek. I'm Torrin Atkinson.